Hello everyone, today I'm back yet again to turn this piece of wood into a custom grip for my Minolta X700. Initially I'd planned to make a piece for the FTB that I repainted in my last video, I'll link to that somewhere, but I don't really shoot with that camera, I shoot with this one. And with the proximity to the holidays, I thought, why not make a gift for myself? Of course, this project in video began in December and it's now February. So I'm not exactly on track with my New Year's resolution of posting bi-weekly. Anyway, I began by taking measurements of the camera in various areas around the grip where it would attach to the camera body. These are just rough measurements, so I have an idea of what size piece I'm gonna need. I chose to work with maple for no other reason than that I like the way it looks and feels. I used the cheapest saw and miter box that money can buy to cut the board to length. I actually cut 2 of these pieces so I could get to the right thickness. A little bit of wax was helpful to keep this cheap saw from binding up. For this project, I'll be using top quality dollar store wood glue. After a quick squeeze and spread, these 2 pieces are ready to be permanently affixed. I arranged the grain in a way that I would like, and then I clamped it together with my one and only clamp. Before we move forward, our block needs a quick chop, so we need to take care of that before we can start laying out our design. With our block of wood ready, we can now trace the shape of the camera's built-in grip onto the block. At first I thought I would just set it on top of a piece of paper, and then I thought, well, maybe I should use a little more precision. So I fired up my computer and then I opened up Old Reliable at draining my bank account every month. I tried to scan the bottom of the camera, but it didn't really turn out too well, so ultimately I just took a picture of the bottom so I could trace it with the pen tool. And there's really not much more to the process than that. All I did was trace over the image that I had, and then I took it and overlaid it on the square that I drew out equivalent to the size of the wooden block. From there, I could combine or delete the paths with the shape builder tool and print out my template. I didn't quite get the shape right on the first try, so I just went back in to make a few adjustments. I also changed the front curve to match the shape of the grip on the body. What I'm aiming for is an OEM Plus type appearance, so basically just something that fits in with the design of the camera and won't look out of place. With our template printed out and slapped on the block, we're ready to lay out the design. Once it's set, we can go back to the saw where I'll cut away as much of the excess that I can. I started to rough out the curved side with my Dremel and a 60 grit sanding drum, but it moved the material way too slowly for my 2023 attention span. Instead, I tried and failed with a few other unorthodox methods before finally giving in to hand sanding. And let me tell you, it was a grueling amount of hand sanding, especially with the hard maple. After working on the rounded side for a while, I still had to deal with the 1/4 inch of excess material on the inside edge. I just didn't have it in me to sand it all down, so I finally decided to stop being such a cheap fuck and I went to the store to buy a coping saw. I don't know why I didn't just do that from the beginning. I would have saved myself a ton of time and frustration. For the small inner curve, I wrapped 60 grit sandpaper around a pen and it was ready for test fitting. The fitment's good, so we can flatten out the ends and mark out where to drill the hole for the strap lug. After taking the time to mark things out as accurately as possible, I promptly drilled the pilot hole off center, which kinda ruined the fitment. This led me to the bright idea of filling the hole with a piece of pine dowel I had laying around and then re-drilling it. Well, no, because the bit just ends up guiding itself back into the softer material and you end up with the same hole again. Luckily, I wasn't too far off the mark, so I was able to drill it out larger to get everything to fit. I didn't want the X700 lettering to be covered up with the grip attached, so I cut and smoothed out a section in the top. At this point, the fit and basic shape are pretty good, but I want to add some nice angles to match the camera body. I'm starting on the side, which is awkwardly sticking out by the hinge. Okay, this is already looking a lot better, so let's move on to the front. I'm going to cut angles to match the ones on the body. At this point, I had quite a bit of time invested into this project, so I was extremely paranoid that either it wouldn't look good or I'd somehow f it up. Even after measuring everything out fairly meticulously, I was second guessing myself. For whatever reason, as I was cutting this, I just kept thinking that the angle was wrong or that I was visualizing it incorrectly, but for once, everything went according to plan. Obviously the cuts are a bit rough, but at this point I'm no stranger to sandpaper, so that'll be an easy fix. Now personally, I prefer to use a camera strap when I go shooting, so I'll need a place to attach one on the grip. This hole I drilled earlier is in an optimal location to put a strap lug. Now we just need to drill a hole to drop a screw down through the top. Don't worry, I definitely didn't mess up and drill it in the wrong position. I didn't want to have to use a base to attach the grip, but unfortunately my shoddy work is making that a necessity. I'm just measuring and cutting another length of the board from earlier, but it's way too thick at 1 inch, so I'll need to rip it down to about half that. Nothing made me happier during this project than being done with this cut. It took forever to get through this, after which I failed to make a template and just did a shitty tracing job. I wasn't really in the mood to do the rest of the cuts by hand, so I just borrowed a jigsaw and then finished the cuts with a coping saw. After some more sanding and smoothing, it's time to attach the grip to the base. It might not do much, but I'll use toothpicks as mini dowels to help align and strengthen the joint. I drilled 3 holes in each piece, but would you believe it, once again I got the positioning wrong, so I filled one on each side and glued everything together. Fits pretty well, it just needs a little bit of cleaning up. Now on to more drilling. I'll need a hole in the base for the mounting hardware. I wanted to use a Forstner bit, but after driving to my not-so-local home improvement store, the 1-inch bit that was supposed to be in stock wasn't there, so I borrowed a 1-inch spade bit from a friend. Unfortunately, it wasn't sharp enough to get through the maple, which he did warn me of. So I went back out the following day to another location and I purchased the bit that I had planned to use to begin with. It got the job done, but working over the partially drilled hole caused some tear out and lopsidedness. Other than that, it attached securely and the mounting screw was more or less flush with the base. I also got the positioning slightly wrong again. Fortunately, there's no drilling left in this project for me to f*** up. There is, however, one final issue to contend with. As you can see, the camera and grip are balanced to hold this MD3 50mm lens. The thing is, I don't really shoot with this lens. I use the heavier MD2 28 2.8 and 50 1.4, and they're too heavy to sit without tipping. To be honest, this probably bothers me more than it should, but I can't leave it that way. I'll fix the issue by making a small extension under the lens mount. The first piece I cut was too small and it looked pretty bad, so I cut a larger piece with the same width as the shroud that goes around the lens mount. A little more glue and a couple toothpick dowels should hold this in place nicely. There are just a few gaps that I want to fill around the joints, so I'm going to make filler by mixing sawdust and wood glue. We're going to give this a good smear into those joints, and then when we come back with our finish sanding, we'll smooth them out. Wow, would you look at that? All the finish sanding is already done, and now we can move on to staining. I'm using a water-based acrylic leather dye thinned about 8 to 1. The stain was applied using a foam brush, and I didn't wipe off the excess because it really wasn't soaking into the wood very well. You can see here it leaves the wood with a kind of grayish charcoal appearance, which actually isn't bad, it just isn't what I'm looking for. I thought maybe an oil stain would do a better job, so I went and got some of that. But then it was so dark, it completely obscured the grain and it looked chalky. The winning combination was oil-based stain sanded down to 220 with water-based stain applied over that and then wet sanded with 000 steel wool. Yes, it was quite the process. For the top coat, I used water-based polyacrylic because I wanted a clear gloss finish that wouldn't change the color of the stain. Once again, I was unhappy with the appearance, which was filled with bubbles, and after 3 coats, it looked really plasticky. Of course, that makes sense because it is literally plastic. I tried wet sanding and recoating, but that also failed. Eventually, I ended up airbrushing the finish thinned about 50% with water. I was trying to avoid doing it that way because I don't currently have a way to film it without covering my camera with overspray, but that will be coming soon. The airbrush gave it a more semi-gloss finish, which actually matches the camera body a little bit better. Our last step is to attach the strap lug, and that's the project complete. Here's a better look at the finish. As you can see, there's no shortage of imperfections. There's an uneven patch on the bottom where I tried to blow the poly out of my logo text. There's the bad hole in the bottom, areas where the airbrush was spitting. I thought about polishing it out, but I think I'll just let it slide. Of course, the best feature is the fact that now when it sits on my shelf with my heaviest lens, it's not going to sit tilted. That would have bugged the shit out of me, so I'm really happy about that. And also, it works with a camera strap, so there you have it. sits nice and level, feels sturdy. I mean, who knows, in the coming weeks you may hear from me telling you about how the strap lug ripped out and my camera smashed on the ground, but time will tell.
All right, so I just thought I'd give you guys my final thoughts on this project. And even though it's not a tutorial so much as a process log, I thought if any of you were feeling inspired after seeing this, that I would tell you a few things that I would do differently. So first thing that I would definitely change is that I would not have used maple for this project. For somebody who was more experienced with woodworking, I think it's fine. This is one of those situations where now that the project is done, I'm glad that I used maple, but during the process, it was pretty brutal getting through just that dense of a material and with all the hand sanding that I had to do. If I were to do it all over again, I would probably use either poplar or pine. I think poplar would probably be a good choice because it's still pretty hard. And especially since I was just gonna stain it black anyway, you know, the grain isn't the most important thing. All right, this thing is getting in the way. The other thing that I would have done differently is I would have designed the grip to have the base from the get-go. I had these grandiose plans of being able to attach this without a base. I just didn't want to have the extra bulk. But now that it's done, I really don't mind it at all. And it would have made my life a whole lot easier. I wasted a lot of time trying to figure out a way to get the strap lug to attach through the hole in the side here. I was going to use like a long screw or a pin or something like that. But yeah, I just don't have the level of precision required to make that happen. It wasn't realistic. And then the last thing that I would have definitely changed is the base. Rather than just tracing it out, I kind of glossed over it in the video, but I just kind of slapdash, like traced the size or the shape of the base, rather than just making a template like I did for the initial grip over here. I don't know why I just didn't do that, but it would have made the fit and finish just a little bit better. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, it is what it is. This thing's gonna get used and banged around anyway, so and at the end of the day, it's just a prototype. So I'm quite happy with how this turned out. In fact, I'm actually quite impressed with myself with this. It's not like the most amazing thing in the world, but I think it turned out pretty well. One other thing is during the process of staining and wet sanding, the wood started to split where this screw hole is. So I didn't show it, but I actually took super glue and just kind of crossed my fingers that it wouldn't get worse, and it didn't. I don't know if that's gonna hold. I have no idea how that's gonna affect this over time, especially with this strap lug holding the weight of the camera and the grip. But it's not, I mean, this whole setup isn't that heavy. It's less than 2 pounds still, or somewhere around 2 pounds maybe. But that might be a problem later on.
If you've made it this far, I do greatly appreciate it. As always, if you liked the video, share it with your friends. If not, share it with your foes. If you are interested in seeing more content like this, consider subscribing. I've got quite a few things lined up for the coming weeks, hopefully to get on a more regular posting schedule, some camera related, some not, so your interest may vary, but in any case, I'll be around. Until next time, peace.